closet, writing letters to myself. This is the place where no one knows who I am, where I can think without thinking about what anyone else would think, or at least it's quiet. I don't want to scare anyone, but things can't go on like this. Until today, I could go into the living room and talk to my mother's Saturday morning fat club. I could say, "Hi, how are you? That's a nice dress. Magenta's such a good color, it hides the hips. Nice shoes, too. I would never thought of bringing pink and green together like that." I could pretend to be okay, but that's part of the problem. In here, pressed up against the towels, the sheets, the heating pad, it is clear everything is not honky-dory. I've got one of those little itty-bitty book lights and I'm making notes. Today is Odessa's day. At any minute, she might turn the knob and let the world, disguised as daylight, come flooding in. She might do that and never know what she's done. She'll open the doors and her eyes will get wide. She'll look at me and say, "Lord." She'll look at me and say, "You could have given me a heart attack." And I'll think, yes, I could have, but I'm having one myself and there isn't room for two in the same place at the same time. She'll look at my face and I'll have to look at the floor. She won't know that having someone look directly at me, having someone expect me to look at her, causes a sharp pain that begins in my eyes, ricochets off my skull, and in the end makes my entire skeleton shake. She won't know that I can't look at anything except the towels without being overcome with emotion. She won't know that at the sight of another person I weep, I wish to embrace and be embraced, and then kill. She won't get that I'm dangerous. I'm hiding in the closet with my life suspended. I'm hiding and I'm scared to death. I want to come clean. I want to see myself clearly in detail, like a hallucination, a deathbed vision, a Kodacolor photograph. I'm hiding in the linen closet and I want to introduce myself to myself. Like I need to see. If I am really as horrible as I feel, I will spontaneously combust, leaving a small heap of ashes that can be picked up with a dustbuster. I will explode myself in a flash of fire, leaving a letter of most profuse apology. Through the wall, I hear my mother's fat club ladies laugh. I hear the rattle of the group and the gentle tinkling of the individual. It is as though I have more than one pair of ears. Each voice enters in a different place with a different effect. What kind of kid was I? I didn't like to go to school. So I played hooky a lot. I took all of 10th grade off. I just decided I wasn't going anymore. And then when I went back, I had a job working part-time in my junior high, so I didn't have to go as many hours and just all kinds of things. I didn't really like school. I found it very not stimulating. I was actually, frankly, totally bored by it.
Please take me to your shore. I don't want to live anymore. I just feel like I could die. I wander through the night.
I took a lot of photographs. I used to print my own stuff in a darkroom I made in my parents' basement. And I was always calling and lying to get photo passes to go photograph at concerts. So I photographed everybody from Muddy Waters to the Rolling Stones to, all these people. And I liked that a lot. I mean, I was always doing something. I was also very politically active in the whole anti-nuclear movement. So I was always in charge of these huge rallies for, 500,000 people in Washington. And all the other people organizing it were always much older than I was. And my father would have to drive me to the meetings and stuff. And people would say, like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, "Never mind." At a certain point when I was in high school, I started writing letters to famous people. And I would literally write letters to, like, John Sayles, the filmmaker, was my pen pal for years. But I would write him not about, like, "Oh, I think you're so great." It was like, "Today at school, like, so-and-so was mean to me. Tomorrow I have to go, to the doctor's office." And we had just exchanged, like, these letters about daily living. And I had lots of pen pals, but very, very famous people. And I mostly always wrote to men because women were really mean about writing back. They're like, "I don't like letters." And now I understand that because I'm really horrible about writing people back. I find it very kind of scary and intrusive. But guys sort of could care less, so they would always write me these very long letters. And I liked that a lot. I mean, I really was always trying to kind of get out of my world, which was a very kind of upper middle class, you know, for lack of a word, pretty safe existence. And I wanted something that was a little bit more challenging. Hi, Daria. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for coming out.
Happy to always get out.
So, let's talk about how you schedule your day. What's a typical day for you?
I would say a good day, which isn't always typical, as we know, is I get up sometime between about 5 and 6, and on a really good day, I'm at work by 6:30 in an ideal world. And I really work through the morning up till probably about 2 o'clock and have lunch, and then that's kind of it for me in terms of really working hard and creating new work. And then, you know, in the afternoon I can rewrite things, I do business things, but I don't really do that much writing. And I like to really work every day if I can.
It's the morning because it's just a scheduled time for you, or is it, you know, convenient? That's the time you've set for it?
I would say at this point in my life, it really is my nature that I want to get up and I want to go to work while my mind is fresh, while I don't have a lot of other things distracting me. You know, ideally I like to just get up and get straight to work without a lot of distraction, which is hard in New York because all kinds of things happen that really make it difficult. But that's a good day for me. I am. I mean, I would say I'm, you know, for lack of a better word, I'm horribly American. Do you know what I mean? I think, although my family actually has a lot of parts of it from Europe, but my sensibility is very American. I think I'm kind of like the all-American person in a way. But also maybe not anymore. I mean, I think of my sense of America is probably very traditional in the sense that it is about, I don't know, kind of basic beliefs. You know, things like you do have the freedom to write what you want. You do have the freedom to speak. The idea being that, say, we have an election and that the election is fair. Things that maybe are all long gone. I don't really know. You know, it's a very, my view is a very classical American view, if there's such a thing. And there may not even be such a thing. Maybe that's the problem in some way.
Do you set a goal for yourself about how much work you're going to do in one day, or is it however, you know, just do it?
No, I don't have any goal. I mean, my goals are longer term than any given day. I think some days are better than others. There are days where I think I should have worked harder, that I was being a little bit lazy. You know, I think the goal is kind of be something like, okay, I want to finish a book by the end of this year. I want to do this by this time, but it's not particular at any given day.
Want to walk around the neighborhood for a little bit?
I actually want to show you one of my favorite little restaurants. It's right across the street. And this restaurant, which used to be uptown, and moved downtown. It's called San Ambrose, and I would say it's my favorite place in the neighborhood to go.
Okay.
And they make the best cookies in New York City. So, good afternoon. Americans want things in enormous quantity, whether it's rolls of toilet paper or bottles of orange juice. I mean, everything has to be, it's better if it's gigantic. So that interests me. And our cars should all be big. Everything should be really big, and that means that we are successful. Your house is really big. I mean, just everything just bigger and bigger and bigger. And I find it kind of scary in a way, that nobody thinks, is this weird? You know, we don't really have room for all this stuff. And I think it's very funny when you live in New York City because you can't even like put the stuff away. You know, in New York City apartments, the refrigerator is small. So, I mean, American culture, one of the first questions is like, what is American culture at this point? I'm not even sure. I mean, I think we've also shifted away from being a culture that was about kind of ideas and heroes to being really a movie star culture. You know, it's all about celebrity. Do you like cookies?
Yes.
Okay. Could I get one each of the apricot and the raspberry, please?
Yeah, would you like to have them here or to put in a bag?
For here is actually perfect. Thank you. How much do I owe you for that?
$1.
$1. There you go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to try one of these. Pick which one you like.
Ooh, what's apricot?
Apricot or raspberry?
Raspberry.
I knew you'd pick that. I like this one better.
Good.
These are my favorite. I remember talking to Grace Paley about what is a writer's responsibility. On the one hand, she said it's like being a plumber. Plumber has a responsibility. you have a responsibility to do a good job. So for me, what doing a good job means is that I am able to both document the culture and to some degree comment on it. So I don't want to ever read a book. I don't like books that are just sort of a document of everyday life. I want that to be kind of heightened and condensed and to go a little bit further than that. I feel like on the one hand, you have a responsibility to, to try to tell stories and to work hard and to create things that change people's lives. I would say that's the biggest responsibility, and that illuminate so that people can read your work and then see themselves in the world differently. I'm hiding, I'm eating a cream cheese and cucumber sandwich, and I'm having my head examined. I'm in the neighborhood of my soul and getting worried. I'm trying not to hate myself so much, trying not to hate my body, my mind, the thoughts I think. I'm hiding in the linen closet having a sex change. I'm here with a pad of paper writing things I've thought and then unthought, thoughts that seem like incest, like they shouldn't be allowed. I'm trying to find some piece of myself that is truly me, a part that I would be willing to wear like a jewel around my neck. My foot. I love my foot. If I had to send a part of myself to represent myself in some other country or in some other way, I would amputate my foot and send it wrapped in white tissue on a silk embroidered cushion. I would send my foot because it is me, more me than I am willing to let on. There are other parts that are also good, hands, eyes, mouth, but after a few months I might look at them and not see the truth. After a few years I might look at them and think of someone else. But my foot is mine, all mine, the real thing. There's no mistaking it. I look at it, I take off my sock, it screams my name. I could go on for hours demonstrating how well I know myself through my foot, but I won't. It is embarrassing. The foot, my foot, that I wish to wear on a ribbon around my neck, is an example of grace twisted and trapped. Chunks of bone and flesh conforming to the dictum form follows function. It is a wonder I am not crippled. I am hiding in the linen closet writing a declaration of independence. I am in the closet, but the worst is over. There is hope trapped inside my foot, inside my soul there is possibility. I am looking at myself and slowly I am falling in love. I have figured out what it takes to live forever. I am in love and I am free. We are outside of Yaddo, which is an artist colony in upstate New York, and it was founded about 115 years ago by a family named Trask. And the entire foundation of Yaddo is built on tragedy. Mr. and Mrs. Trask had 2 children, and they both died. I think one drowned and the other died of some horrible illness. And then Mr. Trask was killed one night on New Year's Eve coming up from New York City on the train. There was a train accident and he was killed. And they had always had a history of inviting artists from New York to come up and spend the summer with them. And Mrs. Trask was a poet and a playwright and very much an artiste herself. And after Mr. Trask died, she moved into a smaller house on the property and began saving money for Yaddo to be turned into an artist colony. And it's basically operated as an artist colony, I think, since about 1926. I first came to Yaddo in 1989 as an incredibly young writer, and I had a room looking out actually right over this lawn. It was pretty incredible, and I felt so well taken care of because they prepare all of your meals, and I had this incredibly beautiful view. And I actually thought there was something about being here and being in this wonderful large house that helped sort of expand my view, that I felt able to write in a much larger kind of a canvas and to think bigger ideas, and that suddenly more things were possible. And one of the things that's wonderful about being at Yaddo is in the summer there are probably about 30 writers, artists, painters, photographers here. So I met a lot of people. I met composers. I'd never known a composer until I came to Yaddo. And throughout its history, I mean, it's, you know, many people who've won Pulitzer Prizes and just all kinds of awards. They're very, very talented. It was just an incredible community to be part of. So this is the back passageway of Yaddo, and it leads directly into the Great Hall. This is where we come every night when we get ready to go for dinner. And this right here, if you turn your eyes, are the bells that we ring every night to summon people to dinner. So every night at Yaddo when it's time, which is very early, 6:30, it goes like this. And then all the little writers and artists come scampering down the halls and come into the dining area. And Yaddo was built on the idea of an English manor house, and it actually burned down once, probably about 100 and some years ago, and then was rebuilt again. And in this music room, and these are actually portraits of Spencer and Katrina Trask, who are the people who founded and donated Yaddo to the artists. And of course we adore them and pay reverence every day. And this is the Yaddo dining room. And then over here we have what is known as the silent table. And the beauty of the silent table at Yaddo is that if somebody comes down to breakfast in the morning and they don't want to be talked to or have any conversation, they sit at the silent table. Now, of course, among the artists, we always make fun of the people sitting at the silent table, of course, behind their backs. Meals at Yaddo are served 3 times a day, much like other places. And breakfast and dinner are served in the dining room, and lunch is in a lunchbox that's left out for you to take to your studio. And breakfast is from 8 to 9 in the morning, and dinner is at 6:30 at night, which is a little early for most of us, but we find a way. I think when I was younger, I read a lot of Dostoevsky, I read a lot of Kafka, I read a lot of Nabokov. I always call it sort of the old dead Russians. I also really read a lot of plays. That was the first thing that I did, was I wrote plays, and I liked that a lot. And people like Harold Pinter was a huge influence, Edward Albee was a huge influence. I also read a lot of black literature. A guy named Claude Brown, who wrote a book called Man-Child in the Promised Land, was something I read again and again, and just really loved it, and in an odd way identified with it. I think in the sense of it, the outsider status of the character in that book, and I think I felt very much always like an outsider until I inherited this beautiful property. Just kidding. And now I feel whole. No. Yeah, I read, what else did I read? You know, a lot of John Cheever, actually, who spent a lot of time here at Yaddo. Like Truman Capote, a lot of short stories like Flannery O'Connor and Eudora Welty. I read basically anything I could get my hands on. I love to read, and I really loved the process by which, as a reader, you make pictures in your head that go with the story. So it was always important to me to write things that were very visual. I don't write something unless I can kind of see it in my mind's eye, and that's a big thing to me. But there's no one book that made me go, wow. I liked all kinds of things. As a kid, I used to read a lot of, grown-up fiction. I didn't really read a lot of children's books. I was always kind of sneaking into the adult part of the library. I thought that was somehow very sexy as a kid. Like, I'm reading adult books, as though they were pornographic. It could be anything. It could be Dostoevsky. It's an adult book. So I liked that. I read everything. There's also, in all seriousness, a lot of talk about ghosts at Yaddo. And we believe that there are ghosts here, and very often people speak of being visited by one of the Yaddo ghosts, which are known to be benign and quite friendly. And one of the things that you see a lot of at Yaddo is you see a lot of stained glass, and all of the stained glass windows here were made by Louis Tiffany for the Trask family. The scene of the dawn coming, and then a scene here, actually, which was based on Katrina's own story of what she thought the first Native American inhabitants of the land that Yaddo is on. Yaddo is incredibly filled with its own history, and both the history of the Trask family and the sort of tragedy of the loss of their children and Mr. Trask's death and how it came to be this artist colony, and then the history that's accrued over the years from just the hundreds and hundreds of artists who've been here, among them John Cheever, Truman Capote, Catherine Ann Porter, Patricia Highsmith actually donated her estate to Yaddo. She finished the book Strangers on a Train during her one and only visit here, which I think was probably in the 1940s sometime, maybe in the 50s, I'm not sure. More recently, we've had Michael Cunningham, Oscar Huelos, Mona Simpson, Laurie Moore, Rick Moody, Jonathan Lethem, Donald Antrim, basically almost anyone you can think of, and lots of other painters and composers as well. People get enormous amounts of work done. There's a lot of cross-pollination. Many operas and other works of art have come out of composers meeting, say, poets while they're here and setting the poems to music. It's a very, very fertile place. The American sculptor David Smith had an interesting comment a long time ago. He talked about how no artist can make work outside of their time, meaning outside of the period that they live in. In that sense, I am part of a generation of writers because I am of a certain age and I grew up in a certain period, and I have affinity with the other writers who grew up in that period. I don't feel that I am part of any particular kind of writing or school of writing. I would say the most important things to me along those lines are to, as I would say, write my ass off. I mean, to just write really well and to work hard and try to write something that is of lasting importance to people. I mean, that's the biggest goal, and I don't know that that's in any way generational or gender-based. There are things I do not know. I was absent the day they passed out the information sheets. I was home in bed with a fever and an earache. I lay with the heating pad pressed to my head, burning my ear. I lay with the heating pad until my mother came in and said, "Don't keep it on high or you'll burn yourself." This was something I know but choose to forget. The information sheets had the words "things you should know" typed across the top of the page. There were mimeograph pages, purple ink on white paper. The sheets were written by my 4th grade teacher. They were written when she was young and thought about these things. She thought of a language for these things and wrote them down in red magic marker. By the time she was my teacher, she'd been teaching for a very long time, but had never gotten past the 4th grade. She hadn't done anything since her Things You Should Know sheets, which really didn't count since she's written them when she was still a student. After my ear got better, the infection cured, the red burn mark faded into a sort of Florida tan. I went back to school. Right away, I knew I'd missed something important. Ask the other students to fill you in on what happened while you were ill, the principal said when I handed her the note from my mother. But none of the others would talk to me. Immediately I knew this was because they'd gotten the information sheets and we no longer spoke the same language. I tried asking the teacher, "Is there anything I missed while I was out?" She handed me a stack of maps to color in and some math problems. "You should put a little Vaseline on your ear," she said. "It'll keep it from peeling." "Is there anything else?" I asked. She shook her head. I couldn't just come out and say it. I couldn't say, "You know, those information sheets, the ones you passed out the other day while I was home burning my ear. Do you have an extra copy?" I couldn't ask because I'd already asked everyone. I asked so many people, my parents, their friends, random strangers, that in the end they sent me to a psychiatrist. "What exactly do you think is written on this things to know paper?" he asked me. "Things you should know," I said. "It's not things to know, not things you will learn, but things you already should know, but maybe you're a little dumb so you don't." "Yes," he said, nodding. "And what are those things?" "You're asking me?" I shouted. "I don't know. You're the one who should know. You tell me. I never saw the list." We're in a place called Uncommon Grounds in Saratoga Springs, New York, and it's a cafe, as you can probably see. And I come here pretty often when I'm in Saratoga. I'm usually here once or twice a day, actually. Usually my kind of work habit is I start working the early part of the day at home or wherever I am living, and then at some point I actually go out and sit someplace and take my pages and work on them more, and take the computer also. I'm listening to what everyone's saying all the time. And every now and then I will write a little something down. It obviously probably doesn't fit right into what I'm working with at that moment. But yeah, I do. I pick the bits and pieces, sure. In a culture of sort of enormous plenitude. Everybody has a lot of stuff, and people seem very interested in gathering more. I think we live in a very American culture. I mean, it's very kind of greedy. It's not very appreciative of what it has. It's kind of superficial in many ways. It's a lot about just I don't know, money and more and more and more. So that interests me. And at the same time, I think people are pretty dissatisfied. They're not that close to their families. They're not that interactive with the world they live in. They don't even notice they're part of a bigger world. So I think about how do you represent that in fiction? And then it takes a while, and sort of at a certain point, characters kind of come to me, and then they take, years to unfold and kind of make themselves known, and then there's a story. This is what happens to a bedroom at Yaddo in the winter. I'll throw the light on for you. Every piece of furniture, you're getting a view no one has ever seen before. Every piece of furniture is wrapped. Most of the furniture here at Yaddo has been here for more than 100 years. And when they close the house down for the winter, they want to be sure to protect it for the next year when it opens again. Come in this one, you can see. Plastic bag over a bust. This is very American, I think. And usually tie a rubber band around it and call that wrapped for winter. But this was Spencer's private bedroom, and one of the interesting details about it is that over this way, there's a secret staircase so that you can actually leave the mansion. It's heavily bolted and locked at the moment, but this passageway leads down a small private set of stairs outside, so that whoever is staying in this room has the ability to come and go without anyone else noticing. We'll climb the stairs up to Katrina's room. This is Katrina's private bedroom. And one of the things as an artist that I always thought was funny about this room whenever I stayed in it was I actually found it confusing to work in here. I never knew which desk to use, and do I use that desk for half the day, and do you go to this desk for half the day? It's an incredibly beautiful room that gets a lot of light, and it is sort of one of the prized rooms at Yaddo. There are, quote, good rooms and bad rooms, and this is the best room. Somebody once sent me a letter in which he went through and counted the number of times I had used certain expressions in The Safety of Objects. And it was, I think there were 19 references to things burning down. There was an enormous amount of Coca-Cola drink that people had drunk, Diet Coke in particular, and people took a lot of Valium. And I'm sure that those things in everything that I'm writing, even in this book I'm writing now, there's a big fire. And I don't know what that is, but in that sense, there are recurring images, which I think again are part of kind of any artist's vocabulary. It's part of kind of the gestures that you use to tell the story. Are there words that I really don't like? I think the other thing about that is that I try in many ways to keep my language fairly simple. I look at writers like John Steinbeck is a good example, and I think anybody with a very limited education could read Steinbeck's work. It's linguistically not so complicated that you have to have a college education to understand it. On the other hand, the more you know, the more you bring to it, and the more you're able to read into the work. And I like that. I mean, I want my work to be accessible. I don't want it to be sort of so overwritten or so vocabulary bound that somebody has to sort of stop reading a piece of fiction to look up a word. It's important to me that it be accessible, but also that kind of the smarter and more sophisticated the reader, the greater the depth. There's something on the doorknob. That's fascinating. Okay, this is fascinating. There's a tag on the door which must tell you that it's already been prepared for winter. This is actually my favorite room at Yaddo. I've had this room many, many times over the years. Clearly it's all packed up for winter. And what I can tell you about why I love this room, this is looking out over the front of the house and the driveway. It's not a popular room because often in the morning the food delivery trucks come, and every time the man comes to bring produce, you hear it. But I love this room because it has a double bed. which is a big deal at Ideata. There are very few double beds. And I like to sleep with my books. I like to sleep with everything that I'm reading. And then when I get up in the morning, I literally tumble out of bed and I go in here into this workroom. And I spend hours and hours in this workroom. Here are my tables and chairs. Summer, what you do is you just open your windows, and it's incredibly beautiful, and this phenomenal kind of country air comes in, and you really feel like you're living in a treehouse in many ways. That's one of my favorite parts of Ideata, is being high up and the sense of being in the trees. And actually my favorite time of year to be here is in what I call the rainy season, which is the end of May into June. One time I was here and it rained for 29 days straight, and I think I wrote a whole book. And I also think, I mean, yes, my stories are very urban in many ways, but in order to write that, I actually have to step away from it and get the time and kind of the space to do that. And I just get tons of work done here. And I'm a country girl at heart. To finish a book is kind of, in a way, it's sad, because you just kind of are, you know, I mean, you know it's coming, and then it's all of a sudden it's over, and then it's sort of like, oh, what next? I was talking the other day to Brett Ellis, who said to me that he just finished this new novel, and that basically that was the person he'd been dating. He'd been dating the book he was writing. So it is like a big piece of your life, and when it's gone and done, it's a big thing until something else, the next thing evolves. I kill people. No, I'm just, rituals. No, I mean, I'm trying to talk to myself lately about taking notice. That I think in general, when things happen in your life, it's important to sort of stop and take notice of them and pay attention. So for me, when I finish this book, I want to pay attention to what that feels like, and is there a sense of loss? I mean, there's a weird kind of grief almost in finishing it. And to kind of know a little bit more about that, and maybe even write about that a little bit. But in terms of an actual ritual, you know, I might let myself have some chocolate or something, you know, sort of a prize. And sometimes I'll let myself buy something that I, you know, wouldn't otherwise. Fancy shoes, I don't know. I'll sing and the end note cymbals will crash and the sound will hold the air for a minute, and the swinging of a top hat and cane I will dance away. I'll dance down the hall towards the den. I want to find my father in the den, the family room, watching tennis on television. I want to catch him in the middle of a set and say, I can't wait for a break. I want to tell him, life must go on. He'll say that it's match point. He'll say he's been trying to tell me that all along. But why didn't you tell me what it really means? It seemed pretty obvious. And then I'll tell him, I'm in love. There'll be a pause. Someone will have the advantage. My feet will go clickety-clack over the parquet floor. And he'll say, yes, you sound very happy. You sound like you're not quite yourself. Myself that I've ever been. I want to find Odessa. Life will go on, I'll tell her. I'm in love. I'll take her by the hand and we'll dance in circles around the recreation room. We'll dance until we're dizzy and Odessa will ask me, are you all right? And I'll only be able to mumble, because my grin will have set like cement. I'm hiding in the linen closet, writing love letters to myself. When I think about the falling apart of family, I guess I think about fragmentation in a sense, and distancing, and how I feel that very often in families, as much as they are together as a family, they have no idea who any of the people are. So they're not necessarily listening to each other, they're not hearing each other, they're not seeing each other as they wish to be seen. So again, I always just kind of want to go in there and dig around. I mean, my own family is my parents are not divorced. I have a brother. I have a very kind of normal, family, and I grew up in a very normal way, but I really am interested in those fractures and in that kind of distancing that I feel like has become very much the way of being in America, that people grow up and they move away from their family. And I think in European cultures, people don't really move so far away from their families. And I always, I guess, had the fantasy of having an incredibly large family. And I've yet to pull that off. My family is small. And I like the notion of a big family and a very inclusive family. Everything big. Welcome to America.
Would you live anywhere else in New York besides the West Village? Is there any other neighborhood that's like...
Yeah, I would probably live almost anywhere in New York. I mean, I think, really for me, I live in my head, and as long as there's light, air, water, and I really need sunlight. I mean, I like this neighborhood because I really do like the scale of the buildings. They're low and there is sky and it really is a neighborhood. But I think there are a lot of neighborhoods in New York City. Part of it is just sort of finding them. I think in terms of the dissonance between the observable normality of my life and the intensity and the darkness of the fiction, part of that really is about, I'm willing to go into myself very, very far. And I'm really very much, in both my personal life and in my work, about truth. I cannot bear people who don't see themselves honestly, who don't talk about themselves honestly. And that's really part of what I'm always writing about. And I think that that's difficult for people because we live in a world where people want to do a lot to kind of obscure how they really are. Or they have, and I talk about this, a public self versus a private self. I believe in the imagination. I really am somebody who believes that writers and artists can create from what I think of as their mind's eye. So on the one hand, yes, I'm drawing things in from obviously my personal life, obviously the just daily things that happen in the world, really, and filtering that, but I really also am making up things. I'm inventing people and places and a whole set of experiences that are, for lack of a better phrasing, based on truth and based on possibility, but it's also about taking that one level further. Somebody once said that I write emotional science fiction, and I think that's true because for me it really is about a kind of a heightened emotional experience that's almost Kodacolor or like photographic in its coloration and its intensity, but I'm not that interested in my own experience. It doesn't do it for me.
Are your friends or the people you socialize also artists, or do you?
A lot of my friends are artists. I have a lot of friends who are in the visual arts. I really like that a lot. I find that people who are painters and photographers actually read a lot. They read a lot more than most of the writers I know. I also have some friends who are in sort of businesses related to the arts, and that interests me a lot. I sort of find business fascinating. It's a secret side of me that no one knows about.
But very American.
Very American, yeah. And most of my friends are not writers.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is not to say I don't have writers as friends.
Right.
But I don't talk to my writer friends all the time. I think writers in a funny way are a little bit boring. What's a good day for a writer? Well, I wrote. It's so intellectual and mental that it doesn't make you a great conversationalist on a daily basis. And I think if you're really working on a big novel or something, on the one hand, it's fun to talk to another writer who's doing the same thing and kind of commiserate and share stories about it. On the other hand, I'd rather talk to somebody who's doing something completely different, or who's out in the world in a very different way. has writing given me? I mean, I would think it's given me, in a way, incredible access to myself. I think it's given me entree into a much larger world because I use the excuse of being writer to open other doors for me, because I'm basically very shy. But when I go in as a writer, I feel able to ask questions and explore things that I wouldn't otherwise. It's really given me my life in many ways. I mean, I move through the world as a writer. That's how I identify myself, and that's probably the first way I identify myself. What it's taken from me is, it's taken my anonymity in many ways, although I'm physically anonymous until now. You know, most people who know my work don't even know what I look like, because they don't associate the physical person that you see here as the person who would write those things. They say, oh, I see much nicer, I see much more normal than the work, which they think of as being quite dark. So in that sense, I have a certain amount of protection because I am a woman and I write about things that most women don't write about. And I sort of have a rigor to my work that isn't in a lot of other fiction by women. But I also am not anonymous, and I have a place in the world, and I both celebrate that and like that, and it's brought me to a lot of people, but I also think there is some cost associated with it. I mean, I have a family now, and my family is the family of a writer. So on the one hand, I'm not home sometimes when I should be home, whether it means that I'm off writing and I'm someplace quiet and alone, or I'm, you know, at a conference or giving a talk somewhere or reading. And I give readings all over the world, but I love that part of it. So I think it's also, it's brought me into the world in wonderful ways. It is about wanting and need, a peculiar, desperate kind of need, needing to get what you never got, wanting it still, wanting it all the more, nonetheless. It is about a profound desire for connection. It is about how much we don't know, how much we can't say, what we don't understand. It is about how unfamiliar even the familiar can become. It is about holding one's breath, holding the breath until you are blue in the face, holding the breath to threaten, to dare, to say, if you do not give me what I want, I will stop breathing. It is about holding back, withholding. It is about being stuck. It is about panic. It is about realizing you are in over your head. Something's got to give. It is about things falling apart. It is about fracture.